From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Monday, August the 17th, 2020. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Rivlin met at the president's residence in Jerusalem today to discuss the Abraham Accord, the normalization of ties between Israel and the United Arab Emirates announced last week. Rivlin congratulated the Prime Minister as well as President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed on reaching the groundbreaking deal. Netanyahu thanked Rivlin, saying this is an historic agreement that will benefit not only Israelis and the UAE. I think it brings closer Arab-Israeli peace that will, in the end, advance peace in general. Earlier today, Rivlin extended an invitation in Arabic to bin Zayed to visit Israel and Jerusalem and be our honored guest. Rivlin expressed it in the letter, his hope that the new peace deal will help build and strengthen the trust between us and the peoples of the region. He wrote, "I have no doubt that future generations will appreciate the way you, the brave and wise leaders, have restarted the discourse on peace, trust, dialogue between peoples and religions, cooperation, and a promising future," which he said he hoped will also serve as a beacon illuminating the road ahead for others. And in perhaps such a sign, Israel's Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi tweeted that he spoke over the phone today with the Foreign Minister of Oman. Yesterday, Ashkenazi spoke with the UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, and today with Yusuf bin Alawi bin Abdallah. Tweeting, "We spoke about recent developments in the region, the normalization agreement with the United Arab Emirates, and the need to strengthen relations between Israel and Oman." We will have more for you, by the way, on the historic agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates on tonight's In the News. An Israeli border police officer was attacked in Jerusalem this evening. The 19-year-old was said to have been stabbed several times near the Lion's Gate in Jerusalem's Old City. He was taken in moderate and stable condition to Jerusalem's Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center. The attacker was shot by officers at the scene and was said to have been neutralized. 2 rockets were fired at Israel from Gaza on Saturday. Both were intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. The IDF tweeted that in response, the Air Force struck Hamas terror targets in Gaza, including a military compound used to store rocket ammunition. Yesterday, the IDF said that Israeli soldiers prevented a terror attack near Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem. A terrorist tried to throw a Molotov cocktail toward the area of the holy site. Israeli troops shot the terrorist before any harm was caused. The IDF also responded yesterday to more explosive balloons launched from Gaza into Israel, with Israeli tanks hitting Hamas observation posts in Gaza in response. Today, one such arson device is suspected to have sparked a fire just outside a kindergarten in the southern town of Sderot. Firefighters were called to the scene and there was no injury caused. The United Nations Security Council on Friday rejected a resolution to extend the arms embargo on Iran, which is set to expire this October. 2 countries voted against the resolution, Russia and China. 11 abstained, and only 2 voted in favor, the U.S. and the Dominican Republic. A resolution has to have at least 9 yes votes and no vetoes to pass. Its failure to pass is concerning in regards to the security of American forces and to the security of the State of Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called the UN vote scandalous. Jewish organizations condemned it as well. The leaders of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, Arthur Stark, William Daroff, and Malcolm Hoenlein, called the vote an outrage and urged the Security Council to consider the implementation of the snapback provisions of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. saying the international community must take this urgent step against a regime that openly calls for death to America and Israel and undermines the stability and security of the region. B'nai B'rith International's President Charles Kaufman and CEO Daniel Mariashin said in its failure to renew these sanctions, the UN Security Council has enabled a rogue regime that threatens the entirety of the Middle East and others far beyond to become an even more dangerous threat to global peace and security, calling as well for the snapback sanctions, writing the international community must stand up now to the belligerent Iranian regime in order to stop the advancement of Iran's illicit nuclear program. And staying with Iran, the Islamic Republic was admonished over its threats to the United Arab Emirates over the deal with Israel. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said on Saturday that the UAE had made a huge mistake by taking steps towards normalization with Israel and now faced a dangerous future. The Arab News website reported that the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is made up of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, warned Iran over its threats. Council Secretary General Naif Falah al-Hajraf said yesterday Iran must adhere to the UN Charter and refrain from interfering in the domestic affairs of other nations. Well, Israeli scientists are testing out a new method to detect the coronavirus, much easier and much faster than the current testing method. It simply entails gargling with a special mouthwash, spitting it into a tube, which is then placed in a machine called Spectralit. CEO of news site Eli Asulin told the Times of Israel that the machine shines light through the sample and onto a special chip, and compares it to a sample from a coronavirus positive person. It takes about a second to provide an answer. News site is working with Sheba Medical Center on the current trial of 400 people. They've already tested half of those people, and results so far are proving 95% accurate. Leading the trial is Sheba Professor Eli Schwartz, who told the news outlet the system is very rapid, cheap, and is looking reliable, noting it would be particularly helpful in places where mass screening was needed, like in airports and in nursing homes. He said he hoped that by the end of this year, the system would be commercially available to everyone. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Monday, August the 17th. At 7 o'clock, it's The Wisdom of Dr. Ruth. At 7:30, it's episode 6 of the JBS original series, From Date to Mate. At 8, Israel's former UN ambassador Danny Danon cautions Israel against listening to its allies, including the U.S., and speaks to the issue of sovereignty over the West Bank. That's with Liz Burney at the ZOA Book Club. At 9, it's part 1 of Mark Golub's interview with Mordechai Kedar on L'chaim. At 10, stand-up comic Judy Gold sits down with Dave Barry, Adam Mansbach, and Alan Zweibel at the 92nd Street Y. And coming up next, the historic peace agreement between Israel and the UAE is explained by JBS Senior Vice President Shachar Azani, who also speaks with Rabbi Mark Schneier, president of the FFEU, who's been the leading Jewish activist promoting peace between Israel and the Arab Emirates. And that's the JBS News Update for Monday, August the 17th, 2020. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well.